protection that
and where.
provided and where it was, that would all be closed session.
Yes, but the,
Number 17 on this one, operational guidelines adopted or maintained.
Yeah.
yes. Now, the fact that we are focused on window film, that's open topic. But the where and the when,
Right,
and
correct.
all of that would be closed. But yes, 17
Okay.
would help with that too.
All right. Any other conversation on BDC? All right. So that would move us to DFI 2, setting tuition for district programs.
One change on this, the law has changed that if we had a psychiatric residential treatment facility in our district and students who do not reside in our district came and attended here for both the psychiatric work and were attending our school, then we could claim their local ADA from the sending school. We don't have such a facility, but the law would allow it, so it goes into the policy in the event that somebody were to open up a psychiatric residential facility in our community.
Okay. And that's what a couple of the questions I was going to raise was, do we have anybody that fits into this policy?
No.
Okay. Any questions on that one? All right. So FFA, this policy is just being rescinded and taken out, and the policy measures that move forward will be shown in policy KH moving forward. And we'll hit that one here in just a little bit.
Yeah, and probably what we should do when these come up for action is you would approve your list as you normally would. This one's maybe a separate motion since it's rescind rather than approve. That way it reflects the actual action that we took on it.
Okay.
And on that one, I did have a question. Obviously, it's addressed in KH, but I feel like because you were looking at FFA, I just don't, do we know the purpose of taking it? Because I feel like it's then hidden in the gifts, that I wouldn't go to look for that. So if in the situation with that is these can be very tricky and a very emotionally charged topic, and it needs to be by policy treated the same process the same way in every single situation. So if you go and say that's our policy, oh, but it's also hidden under public gifts to school that don't make a ton of sense when you're looking at how you treat deaths and memorials.
Yeah.
I think that's very confusing.
So what we could do is we could find out if either memorials could be worked into the title of KH, or we keep FFA active with its current title and we cross-reference CKH for more details.
Yes.
That way searchable, the word
Searchable
memorial
fine.
is still searchable.
Yeah.
So we can look into that.
Okay. Any other questions on the rescinding of that FFA? All right. So that would take us to GBEBC, criminal background checks.
So the gist on this one is that communities who have adult education courses that they host in their schools while they are also hosting K-12 education, apparently there are concerns that now we have adult citizens going to school under the same roof as our K-12 students. And shouldn't those adult citizens have to pass a criminal background check in order to be educated, feels like side by side with our students? And so this law protects districts that do that, so that it is now required, if you want to come do continuing ed or adult ed in our high school with one of our courses that we don't currently offer, then this just ensures that, yes, if you don't comply with and pass a criminal background check, you're not going to participate in that program.
And you did say we currently don't offer anything like this.
We don't have any Dr. Allen, can you think of anything that would be loosely interpreted? I know we don't explicitly have adult education that goes on.
Not during the school hours.
Yeah, I
So
can't-
when
I can't
students
think
would be
of-
in building.
So what, would it be over in the Jan Reading room? Don't they have some seminars and some things, some type of training or during the school day sometimes?
Where they
that
bring
room?
in outside groups or outside
Right.
folks. If they ever did, then this is what would protect us if somebody were signed up. They will host events, like they might host a blood drive. That would not be a continuing ed, but we would want to have a school safety plan for what that looks like. It's kind of like, you know, when we tend to close our schools on polling days, but if we're having school on a polling day, it's kind of the same idea. We want to have a safety plan for that day to ensure there isn't
I guess-
cross-mixing.
I guess should we get some definition of courses? I mean, I don't know what they're classifying as courses, because if that seminar or that training isn't a course, then it wouldn't apply. If it's truly like a class that has some, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I can't think of what if we offer training during the school day.
And it might have been, I might be merging events. I don't remember if when I saw all those vehicles over there, if it was like during the summer after school was over. And I don't know if summer school would still apply to this.
We do have groups using our facilities nights and weekends for master's degree programs, but we do not allow that during the school day. That's already in policy. If we ever encounter a situation that we feel like we've got something that loosely is tied here and it doesn't cover, we will clean that up. But I feel like this pretty well covers this.
Okay. Okay.
High school attends summer school at South Middle School, is that correct?
That's what we've been doing for the last few years.
So
Okay.
even in that
So no
situation, so we
no
still didn't
students are
have
there.
Students in the same realm.
Okay.
Just for peace.
All right. Any other questions, comments on GBEBC? Moving on. That takes us to IND, ceremonies and observations. And it looks like the only change to this one was they changed it from math, engineering, technology, and science to science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM.
I suspect somebody in the state in the last 12 months, the last time this policy was updated, probably spotted that and thought it should be amended, and they're right. So now we are all updating that. It is a more accurate reflection.
I know, March 21st, can't wait.
I had
All right. And that takes us to JEC1, school admissions.
This really is same law, but it's being addressed in multiple places. So it's mostly on again, they did some editing, but the adult learner admissions, they're 18 and older, not counted by the district. They have to undergo a criminal history background check. So it's the same law. We just want to make sure we cover it in multiple places where it appears.
So the only big difference on that one on page 4 and then even though I know we just small grammatical changes, but on your tuition one on DFI, I'm pretty sure it was that one. I think it's page 4 again, maybe. It's the one we just talked about. Sorry. Oh, criminal background checks. Sorry. GBEB. Page 4 of that one says may be required. I'm just making.
No, you're right.
So we got one that's saying that you will,
says on the current policy, in accordance with law, individuals must undergo a qualifying criminal background check. And on the previous policy,
May
adults.
be required.
I definitely want to dive into that to find out why they would choose may there, and we maybe need to be clear about what the exceptions might be. That's exactly why we do this. I must go back. We have a policy for, what's the label when you are uprooted? No, it's like when there was a hurricane, there's a
Dispersed,
but there's a label,
displaced?
there's a label given to you when you are displaced and you are, yes, it's like a refugee. We have a policy that addresses refugee type status.
They moved here, but they just don't have any record.
It could be McKinney-Vento. Yes, they are protected under McKinney-Vento. We have to get them started right away while we still have to comply with the other laws. So we have to get them, we cannot stop their enrollment based on their homeless status. So that's a very broad law that protects them.
So it doesn't have to be that they're homeless. You just said affects their homeless status, even if not homeless.
Dr. Allen?
Yes, I mean, you're exactly correct. It basically, and I can send you the exact policy. I can do it now. Just showing that we just have so many days to make sure that they're immediately enrolled, whether they can prove birth certificate, prove school records. And we've had situations where we've had to do that as well. But it is a different policy, but I will find that for you.
It was just like, this was like so encompassing of all the children.
Absolutely.
So I guess it doesn't want me to talk. Okay. Yeah. On page 4 of JEC 1, so where it says participating adults may be, and this is again about adult learner admissions, the top 2 sentences. May provide education for adult learners who are not eligible in district K-12 program. Participating adults may pay tuition, meet other district admissions criteria. Do we have a policy that we don't have
Tuition?
any- Yeah, well, just for district admissions criteria based on
The program.
the program. We don't have any program.
We don't have any programs, so we would have to have criteria and the cost of those tuition programs. And for the most part, if we were to do such a program, it feels like our default would be that's programming we're going to provide outside the regular school day. I'm open to the possibility that in the future there's a reason to do it during the day, but then we would want, I mean, from a security standpoint, we would want to know that we had the facilities to support that and everything else. That's just hard to envision right now that we would have classrooms for that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments on JEC 1? All right. That takes us to JEC A2, eligibility to enroll.
Treatment center that we don't currently have in our,
Yeah, so the same law, but this policy needs to be changed so that we can't say no to you because you now are participating in a psychiatric facility within our attendance area. So they capture, the other one is for the funding, this one is for enrollment, and we can't refuse to enroll them.
And the way I read the policy, I'm looking at page 2, second paragraph. Unless there's a waiver of application, if this was to ever be needed, that would be the only time that the administration would need to present that to the school board. Excuse me. It says all other applications will be accepted and granted by the superintendent or designee on behalf of the board. So is there anything that needs to go into the policy to make sure that the board is aware that someone's been granted access, or does it matter? Anybody that wants to answer it.
I don't think the board needs to get involved on an enrollment scale, like with the admissions and requirements of that. So if.
Even though would be it'd be a residency issue. They weren't a resident of Grain Valley, but still coming in.
Right, so they are trying to get a waiver to prove residency. We've then said, here's the process. If our school then denies it, if a waiver request has been forwarded to the board for review, I think if we're reviewing it, it means it didn't meet the requirements of the process that they normally go through, which would then require us to review something that's abnormal or not, in the realms that follows through that. So I don't think we would need review.
If we,
Admissions
at this
and
point,
fees.
if we issue a waiver, it's for one of the reasons that are listed as a viable reason for a waiver. It's already in the policy.
The other two items that I saw were,
And if it were for a reason, I'm sorry, not listed, but maybe should be, then that would be what would come to the board and just say, this isn't really captured by the policy, so we're going to ask the board to rule on this and then maybe even amend the policy to allow for it.
okay. At the very beginning of the policy, is Grain Valley supposed to be listed there somewhere? Just the wording, the way this is worded, the district, common name, district,
That's weird.
and then same thing on page 3, down at the bottom, number 1. Or maybe it was, no, maybe that wasn't it. There was another place that it's listed the same way.
Okay. We'll scour it and change any of them.
And maybe it was in a different, maybe it was in another policy. I saw the same thing. We'll get to
We'll
it.
check them.
What I think this would probably make is whenever the facility is actually providing the education. So there are a few facilities, like Heartland is one that comes to mind that is down like Clinton area. That they then provide the education as well as send a transcript back with records whenever a student becomes active into the school again. So I think if they are providing the education, that then they can say, well, we're getting your education, your ADA money. So that's where I think this would really make the most sense as to what they're trying to get at. But- Yeah, because I.
we can follow up.
Yeah.
I mean, how I feel like the districts would handle it would be that you manage the short term. The sending district continues to own the education in the short term, but should that be captured in policy in some way, I think is probably an important question to double check with MSBA that they don't have a recommendation for that. Yeah.
So,
I mean, because again, we don't have a facility in our school district, so.
the other question I had was on page 3, the enrollment at option of the district, number 1. And the example that they give is, that we can charge, I believe it was, the district may enroll and educate non-resident students on the contractual basis with other school districts that will pay the tuition. And then the example is if we have students from other districts that are attending the alternative school or the alternative education program. Do we have any situations like that, or are all the kids in our?
We used to. We used to send, before we had Snai Valley, we would send kids to Blue Springs under contract with the Blue Springs School District, and that was a program we wanted to keep in-house. So then we started our own program, but we don't, to your question, we don't have students coming in because we have, we keep our seats available for our kids. We're not currently in that situation, but this policy would allow us to do that if we grew the capacity in the future.
Okay. Any additional questions on this one? It sounds like we're gonna need to get some more
Yep.
information on it.
Put our brand on it.
That takes us to J01, student records.
New law that a student's most recent IEP or 504 plan becomes part of their permanent record. And for some reason, there's some confusing language within the way the law was written. And so to be safe, we are being advised at this point that all versions of a child's IEP or 504 are going to be kept as permanent record until it probably gets sorted out in the courts. So this policy reflects that new law and that new policy.
And the storage of that is, I mean, being as now indefinite, do we keep that just on a external drive where somebody can get to it if needed, or is it just in our system somewhere where it can be accessed? How's that work?
When the student is K-12, whether they're our student or they transfer out, I believe it is both in our, it's logged in our online system, and they keep paper copy. But I know that there's a certain point when the student ages out of eligibility, whether they've been our student all the way through or they transferred out, then we digitize everything. So I don't have the exact answer, but we're very careful when they're still school age to make sure that we keep it in one place. But then we're not obligated to just have a room full of file cabinets just for these new IEPs. We can digitize those once they age out. But it is a permanent record, and we have to be able to reference it 20 years later.
Right. I guess my question is more, do we keep it on the system, or do we pull it into a digital age but off the system and just have it available?
It's ultimately pulled off the system. Do you know offhand when that happens, if it's at age 21 or?
Like how many years they keep the paper file at the high school before they digitize it?
I don't remember the
how
name
long?
of our IEP system, but how long does it stay actually in the IEP system?
In SpedTrack?
In SpedTrack before we digitize it independently.
Ask Dr. Shaw.
Yeah.
It's either 5 or 7 years after graduation or something, and then it's all still captured.
Right.
All the IEP documents.
And after
still
that time,
captured.
I mean, practically nobody ever asks for any of those things, but we do keep them by law.
Okay. All right.
Find out, if you'd like to know the exact number.
No, I
of
mean,
years, we can-
that tells me what I need.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments on JO1? All right, we will move on. This brings us to the new policy KH, public gifts to the schools.
Yeah, so this does some updates, and it also pulls in district-approved crowdfunding, and it kind of cleans up the memorials piece, which we're already going to look at. So pretty significant update. Fundamentally, I don't know if it changes a lot of significance about how we've been acting, how we've been handling these things.
So, a couple points that I pulled out were that the superintendent or designee would have to vet all proposed crowdfunding platforms, that it's not just a free-for-all. We can't just tell whatever group, okay, go have fun,
Yep.
go do what you want. It all has to have a process. Do we have that process in place yet? And all of our building admins know what that process is, and that we won't be getting in trouble.
Yeah, Dr. Gooch, I'm proud to say, has been my designee on that, and he's been screening the crowdsourcing for several years now. So I think we've got our staff pretty well acclimated that they can't just go and do a crowdsource, but sometimes we do learn about them after they're activated, and then we review it and coach, train, shut them down if they need to be shut down. So, Dr. Gucci, any significant changes here? There is a distinction. Some of it, because crowdsourcing has become so popular, there are some levels that can be managed at the building level, and you'll review the bigger ticket items, correct?
Yeah, correct. And in addition to that, there are times where I will initiate our director of technology in the technology department if the gift is specific to technology, because we have to ensure that the idea or what the item that's being requested will jive within our network, where we can protect it, where we can make sure that we can, keep the students safe if they have it. So if there is something even more specific like that, I initiate additional people to ensure that it's going to be something that we can manage, and then I sign off on it and give that back to the principal, and they let the teachers know that it's good.
All right. Is there another policy, or would this cover, and maybe it doesn't apply at all, like the stuff that the band does or the dance team, any fundraising or anything like that? Is that captured in this policy, or would that not be necessarily this policy but captured another way? If the dance team, like what we had approved, they're going to Florida for
Is there another fundraising policy?
is there another fundraising policy, or are they doing that outside of the school type of a situation? Is it booster club versus school activity? Do we know how that's looked at?
I know it's addressed by policy.
Okay.
So let's say that the dance team that's a crowdfunding.
Okay. All right. Very good.
And then on that part of the policy, when we're looking at memorials, it appears that this only addresses kind of memorials maybe like pretty far after the fact versus anything immediate, like, which is fine. It's just, again, I don't know where memorials are otherwise addressed if we just struck it out of that other policy. Because if we're not going to have a gift of a tree every student that passes. Like, that, I think that's just really tough if you're accepting gifts as memorials, because that gets really tricky, because that means the people that have money get memorials, and the people that don't. And we don't want to do that. Now, what I think is different, because it talks about the type of wording that can be used. So I know, like, the Jerry Mueller Performing Arts Center, like, it is named in honor of him. I don't know if that's classified as a memorial, because we don't say it's a memorial. So it's just, that's the name,
That was,
which is different.
and that fell under naming of facilities,
of
and so it was an
facilities.
action by the board.
So, like, with this, with accepting gifts for memorials, like, the scholarship, I think, makes sense, but like, purchasing of supplies, or the plants and the trees, or benches and tables and outdoor fixtures, I just think that gets pretty tricky
Yeah,
and can be seen.
and I know there's another policy that specifically addresses what parents can expect when there's a tragedy. So, for example, in that policy, it says what we will do with the student's locker and when. And like, it might even list a specific example, like back in the day when the kids were assigned a parking spot rather than group parking, like what the rules were around reassigning a parking space. Like, so we have policy that addresses what happens immediately in the immediate. It's more about the crisis response or the response to trauma. Yeah, this is more of a longer term and permanent. This is more of what would be a permanent thing, like a gift or a bench or a tree. And I did pull up, we do policy on student fundraising is addressed by policy IGDF, and we also have an administrative procedure on those student fundraisers.
Okay.
So then are we okay with keeping memorials under the gifts, like, with those more permanent structures?
Well,
I think it fits pretty well
yeah,
there.
I agree. I think it fits based on, I mean, they are gifts. It's not that the district isn't purchasing these items. These would be from someone outside saying, we want to donate money, or we want to donate the item, and have it placed somewhere. So I would look at it as, as a gift to the district, just memorializing.
Would it be fair to
Well,
just,
and what I think is tough about, that was a gift from somebody else. The district didn't have anything to do with that. That's why they got a bench. You didn't get a bench. I mean, that wasn't us doing it. That was a gift. But I'm sorry, your son died, but they're not getting a bench because it wasn't gifted to us. Like, I just think that is so, like, it's tricky. I
In
don't know.
general, we try to avoid having benches.
Well,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
and plants and trees and statues and sidewalks and plaques and stuff, like, so I just think it's tough, because right here, by having it in policy, says we do allow it. We will accept your gift.
yeah, and it has been policy, and yet we don't have a lot of benches. We're trying to be proactive, but
So
would you say
would your recommendation be that the district does not accept gifts for memorials?
Yes, we would need, unless we can provide the same thing for everybody, which we cannot control gifts. Like, I think that's just tough to be equitable in that. I don't know. I mean, and now granted, this is my viewpoint, right? That doesn't mean that we need to change it, but that's my concern. And so that's why we talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody else have a thought?
Because like with
For that?
scholarships, anybody can apply for the scholarship, and then that particular scholarship fund gets to choose who receives that designation. So no, you're right. We don't have tons of benches and trees and plaques and statues right now. But if that were to become a thing, then I think we have an issue.
Well,
I think it was struck because it was redundant or it was moved somewhere else. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then that still says, according to our policy, and if we have part of it as policy, that means it's accepted.
wouldn't it
it's
be
in that next
if they
line
make
that's
a
green now.
decision on whether or not to accept it,
Yeah.
if it works? I'm saying like
Gifts
the-
to the, gifts the district
there, but
accepts
then-
will become district property.
I would think that that's,
That's part of it, is it?
Yeah.
We can accept your gift of your kid died, but we won't accept your gift of your kid died.
or no, or they make the decision on what it is that they do
What it is
accept.
and how it's done.
Like it'll be based on, I mean, does this work?
Mm-hmm.
It might be tricky to say we accept gifts under this criteria, but in addition, we would not accept gifts under this criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the death of a child is in that criteria. There's got to be, there would have to be another way to frame that so it didn't sound like that.
Well, that,
Right.
the second line that struck out on page 3, I might, if that got maybe reworded a little bit, but that might cover your,
Well, it says, because like on 4, for benches, tables, whatever, the district will accept this type of memorial to the extent of a suitable location, the style, blah, blah, blah. So I think.
They just
in
reworded
each
it.
one,
Yeah.
they just put how it was necessary for each one versus having it down there encompassing all of them. So like the supplies in alignment with needs.
Yeah.
It's tough business. We've had, in the past, I can think of 2 different memorial type gifts that years later, the trees died and the bench crumbled. And the classes that were associated with those memorials, they expressed concern that their memorials were gone. Those became the property of the district, but there's kind of this assumption that we're going to maintain those things. And of course, we're not trying to kill the trees. And a lot of those benches that you'll see, like, they are just plaster. They are going to crumble to the elements over time. So it's tough. That part is hard.
Well, and I have seen it where districts have had a tree planted as a memorial, and their future growth building requirements required the tree not to be there any longer, which also creates a problem.
Yeah, the place for the memorials that I'm thinking of, both of them, there's now a building there in both cases. So if it hadn't happened, we were going to have to face that.
Yeah.
So, but that is part of, I do think from that standpoint, we're somewhat protected. You know, now whoever planted that tree 25 years ago, could they have anticipated that the main entrance of the school was now going to be in the middle of the school, you know, years later? That's tricky. So it's a delicate topic.
It is.
Yeah.
This policy, may extend or use them. So like there's just, so then when you think about it, like, policy makes it sound like we're going, if there's just some very
Yeah, because what I saw also was that the only time that the board would necessarily be involved in any of that is if it was a financial obligation long-term. Otherwise, it's up to superintendent to figure it out. I mean, as far as memorial scholarships, has there been in the past a memorial scholarship gifted to the district that was not to the foundation?
Yeah, that's part of I can't think of one. The foundation has only been around for 12 years or so, so I'm sure before then there was probably they had to
Right.
have that figured out.
So, I mean, I think as far as having a means to accept memorial scholarships, we have one with the foundation. Correct. So we could probably, that we're no issues there. We still have a way to move forward with that. I mean, I think right now we're just kind of talking through, we could strike through that because we have another way.
We could strike through 3 and 4, and then we're done. No, I'm just saying,
I
we
mean-
have it covered by,
Yeah, I mean, if benches, tables, and other fixtures, if we as a district, as a board feel that's really not a good way that we don't want to have to promote that type of a memorial when someone comes to the district. We just say per policy, we don't do that.
And it's way better that we talk about it and make a decision now.
For sure.
Versus we know who this is gonna impact and who has asked. So our policy then is in direct response to a true
Right.
situation.
No, I
versus
agree.
Now, we are saying, hey, in best practices, this
Yeah.
is how we should respond to these things.
And I agree. I mean, plants and trees, I mean, that is still an ongoing, I mean, I would look at that as a board member as, that's an ongoing maintenance item.
Expense, yes.
So the board would have to approve that. I'd rather not approve that, so I'm okay with striking plants, shrubs, trees.
strike 3 and
Benches?
4.
And benches, I mean, again, we would have to worry about, are we gonna need to
If we need a bench, we buy a bench.
vandalize?
buy a
If it gets vandalized, now we have to go clean it up.
But then it's school district property, no questions, there's no favoritism. It's
No
just-
emotion.
There's no emotion.
No emotion, that's the thing. And we
No.
made the decision when it's not tied to it, yes.
So we're gonna, do we have consensus amongst the board that, number one, we can strike out, we don't need that in our policy here?
Addressed by the foundation.
Number three, we don't need because we don't need to deal with it.
Correct.
Number four, we don't need because we don't need to deal with it. Number two, purchases of library materials, school supplies, and equipment. Selections must be aligned with the district's needs and curriculum.
Someone's going to dedicate favorite children's book to the library, as long as it meets our other criteria for accepting of a resource. That might be a reasonable gift to accept.
Until it gets checked out by somebody and at home, the page is torn out. I mean, whatever. Like all of this. I think it's easier, just so you're saying, we should probably not accept gifts in memorial. Because it's the same responsibility, like if we.
Yeah, I mean, if they
it's a
wanted, if they
plane or a
felt
bench,
like,
sure, a book is a little easier
Yeah.
to replace.
if they wanted to donate such
Something.
materials
Correct.
just because they want to do it to feel good about the situation,
Right.
it's just not gonna be a memorial. That would be in a different situation. So we can scratch number two too. We,
The other purpose of the library is they have to code all the books. It has to. If
Right.
somebody gave it, they could make donate to a classroom library, but we could not purchase it for our library.
right.
To check in.
To review and,
Right.
yeah.
So should we just change it to the district, the school district does not accept
Gifts and memorial.
gifts as memorials or gifts for memorials?
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
wanna-
actually- I'm okay with that.
Yes? Yes.
Okay.
Does the scholarship piece
Is still through the foundation.
foundation.
I
As
wanna
long
make
as
sure
the
that there's
scholarship can
no-
be through
Right.
the foundation.
That'd be
because that's
redundancy.
different.
I don't think so. I don't,
Because then we don't have to worry about.
I think if they're gonna ask a question, someone's gonna direct them to the foundation if they came in and, because they're not gonna read our policy. We just need the policy so that we can reference it back to them and say, we don't accept it for memorials, but our foundation can accept your
Yes.
scholarship.
So every scholarship that's given to seniors could possibly apply for all of those services. But like, trade school, like, someone who's going into education, those are all memorial scholarships. They don't come out of foundation. Someone approved. So that's what my question, I'm like, I don't wanna
They're independent from our foundation. Some are tied within the Education Foundation. Some are with outside agencies that are still awarded to our students and recognized on our award night. I want to double check to make sure that the Education Foundation cannot be interpreted as an arm of the district and that we are actually going to prohibit scholarship donations through the foundation. So we'll make sure that if that needs to be an exception, then that's clarified in this policy.
I mean,
We will
I
take a
think
look
to
at it.
your, I mean, the way I read this is gonna be, I mean, memorial scholarships, this is going to be administered from the school district level. And I'm hearing you say about these other memorials, scholarships is, the school district does not fund them, the school district does not administer them.
Not all of them.
Oh,
If-
are there
if-
any?
I don't think I'm tracking maybe.
Okay, so let's say I passed away.
Yes.
Doesn't go through your it's put on that form.
Yes.
For all seniors. That's a memorial scholarship.
Yes.
And we've just said that.
That's what I want to make sure that we're protecting, because what I'm hearing from the board is we don't want to strike those donations. We just don't want the donation to come to the district.
Yeah.
We're okay with that third party. So we may have to be explicit in policy that we will allow, that we will help promote memorial scholarships that are not directly, that are available to our students not directly associated with the district.
Because at that point, then, we're not send that out.
We don't want to violate our own policy.
Right.
So if it's, I think we either clarify it in this policy or we make sure that it's covered in another policy. And so we'll clean that up before we bring it back.
All right, so to be clear, we're gonna check on number 1, but number 2, 3, and 4, we're good with getting rid of. And then if we're good with getting rid of number 1, because we can do it through the foundation without any issues, the verbiage will say, we don't accept gifts as memorials.
Yeah. If we're good, I want to circle back to the first time we talked about the reference to memorials. Do we, when we were on the first policy, do we still want to reference memorials to this policy
In the title?
in the title?
I don't know if it would be
If we're going to prohibit?
to do it in the title because it's under gifts and it's one of the, it's one of the gifts part of it, so I don't.
Should we, what I can do is I can keep policy FFA and still reference where to look for gifts, including gifts for memorials, cross-reference this policy where it says they're prohibited. I could bring it back that way so the board could review that whole package.
So basically, FFA is obsolete other than saying title is memorials and look here.
And then when you look here, you're going to find out your one option is a memorial scholarship to the foundation.
Potentially.
But does that, I want to make sure that
That covers,
people who are looking for it can find it,
find
and
it.
maybe that's,
Yeah.
leave those breadcrumbs.
Did
Okay.
FFA address holding memorial services?
No.
things?
But we do have that as part of our trauma response or like a crisis
And
response.
that's elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
in a different policy.
And we can authorize that.
Is that- I mean, there-
We try to encourage families to find other venues for that, so that a student's gymnasium does not have to be associated with, that type of service. We want it to be a place to play basketball and those kinds of things. But we do also keep open the possibility that there might be a point in the future that we have the only facility in the region that could host whatever the special event is. But as a matter of administration, we try to avoid it.
And if we were going to do that, there's still quite a bit of paperwork and things that go along with that lease and all
there's an
kinds
approval.
of, approval process for that. Okay. Any other comments on KH? All right, that moves us out of the MSBA 2024B policies and takes us to the local review policies. So these policies are just the first round of our monthly policies that we need to start looking at. So the first one, AA, school district legal status. Did anybody find anything in this policy that looked like it needed to be updated or corrected or changed? Nor did I. So what we will look at is when the board takes action, the last reviewed date would change to that date, and we'll be able to track them that way. Okay, next policy, AF, accountability, commitment to accomplishment. Did anybody find any errors or needs for correction in this policy? It very much is a very strong statement. Do you have any recommendations for changing that? Big weight. Yeah, big weight there. Okay. No comments? The next policy is BBA, school board powers and duties. Anyone have any questions on this? Comments, changes? Okay. That will take us to BCE, board committees, advisory committees to the board. I know this one was actually talked about, I guess last year. We talked about this one some when we went to
started
developing our different
Mhm.
subcommittees.
We referenced it.
Anybody have any changes to this policy? I think it covers what we needed to cover. BCG, school attorney legal services. I think we can all agree that we wish we could do away with those, but we can't. Any changes to this policy that anyone found? All right. BDA board meetings. The way that this is referenced, just when school board meeting or a regular board meeting, workshops aren't necessarily referenced. A district doesn't necessarily have to have the workshops. It's just the annual board meeting or monthly board meeting. So there is no reference to workshops in this. Does anybody have any edits, changes, conversation about this policy?
The most simplest of forms. I think it's fine and appropriate.
Well, I guess if we don't put it on a bulletin board, do we need to change that? Because we just posted it in the window.
No, I would say, window bulletin board, like I would
Does
say
it just need to say posted
posted.
and just
Yeah.
remove bulletin board?
Notice shall be posted and easily accessible on a public. place.
Posted and easily viewable?
Yeah.
Which paragraph is that, is bulletin board in?
Under all meetings, the second paragraph on the very first page there.
The second paragraph?
Under all meetings, the notice shall be posted on a bulletin board. So it's,
Or other easily accessible.
right, so the or qualifies it. Oh, am I on the wrong one? Sorry.
I didn't see any of that.
I think that was under notification of board.
We're on BDA. My bad.
Oh, that's on the next one?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, we'll get to that one in a minute, sir. All right. BDA board meetings.
I'm really excited about that bulletin.
Any changes to this one? All right. BDA, notification of board meetings. Sir?
Hey, there's this thing in here I really want to discuss.
How does Welly not see that?
Good thing we're in this U shape. We would've been on it.
Posted in a bulletin.
We're all command
Oh, right here.
Good thing Nick was over.
So we just, we can,
Oh, you
it seems
posted
like we should be able to strike that so it just says,
Posted
Posted.
in
or
an
easily
accessible
accessible
public
place.
Yeah.
Shall we post?
Posted in
Yeah,
an easily accessible public place.
there you go.
Remove bulletin board.
Only if it was gonna be decorated and pretty. Okay, any additional changes to BDDA, notification of board meetings? BDDG minutes. The only thing I saw in this was the reference to the board secretary actually taking the minutes. Do we need to change that?
You could add the word recording secretary, if that helps clarify it, rather than elected secretary.
Well, because it says secretary of the board versus board secretary. So that's where I thought we were fine on that.
Yeah, it is,
I knew that.
it is a
April,
confusing play on words.
Assistant to.
Regional manager. Well done.
Because your elected officers are under that policy and what their duties are that we're just modifying now. So we could try to clear that up, or we could let it be.
No matter what, if you are on the outside, it might not make sense. If you are on the inside, it does make sense. Like, yeah, I think that's fine.
I will point out in the second to last paragraph, it's,
So-
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Because of the reference, and I think that's what the minutes will be signed by the president and attested by the secretary. So they're both referenced as secretary of. I don't know. I think that's the difference.
Oh, is that the
Correct. The bottom one, the signing, are elected.
Elected.
Current.
secretary.
Oh, well then that isn't the same.
I think that we have to have a different.
Yeah, because I interpreted the second to last paragraph to mean that the two of you are going to sign the minutes. Now, we have all of you sign the minutes,
Yeah.
which I don't think you have to change that language. You just have to make sure the two of you are signing the
Yeah,
minutes.
we just have everybody sign it. It's not required by
It's
policy.
just extra.
Right.
Yeah. But the top one, I think we just need to put board
Recording
or
secretary.
Recording secretary is what I call it.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
We're almost. Yep. Anybody else have any other comments? That takes us to BDDGR1.
The second sentence needs a space between the and board.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other comments on BDDGR1? All right, that takes us to BHE, board member liability insurance. Any questions? Correct.
We do carry such liability protection for each of you individually, by the way. The policy says may, but we do.
All right, very good.
Yes, thank you. And can I ask, this is the first time we're kind of done this on this scale. So just from a procedural standpoint, we have, of the bottom ones, the local review, we have 3 of those that we will bring back now as with active revisions. So in theory, they would get their own 3 readings. Technically, since you have gone over these and talked about the rest, we could not see those again on an agenda, and we could go in and amend each of them to show that today's date is their latest review date. Unless as a board, you wanted to bring them back one more time and make sure before you stamped the next meeting as the review date. So just procedurally, and then once this group moves off, these are all the A policies that are at least 10 or more years old, and all the B policies, we'll move on to the Cs and the Ds, and we'll just keep it flowing if you guys like that rhythm. But we could be done with the ones that we checked off for tonight, if you wanted.
Yeah, so to be clear, because we didn't change anything, we don't have to have an action. They don't have to be in policy. Does anybody see them back?
I say using today's date as a review, I agree with. And then that also, if we keep with that standard, we know that if we bring back our local ones, it's because we did make a change and I'm looking for something different. So I don't, if we're good with them, I'm good with putting the current date and moving forward.
So, top,
These all have to come back. Everything listed 1, 2, and 3 all have to come back, and I'm going to add these 3 down below. I'm going to put them up in there too.
so A, B, C, D, E, F, J is just got it. Everybody's good with it?
And then as we start thinning down this list, we'll prep the next 10 or so in sections C and D out of policies for you to start seeing the next wave.
And I think if everybody's good with it, these do have changes to them after the second read, the third read, they was consent.
Yeah, you could do them after 2 if you wanted.
So the third read, it would be actually in, instead of, if anybody wanted to pull it out.
Do you want to do that? Are you thinking with any policies after a second read? Is that what you're saying? Okay, that's great. If I mess that up in a draft, you'll have to remind me the first time, but I'll make note.
All right. So with that, our annual training, protecting students from sexual misconduct.
And we would like to move across the hallway to the training room for that roughly 60-minute video.